right, cool. Well, I am back for the day. Apologize for having to cut the last video short, but sometimes it's actually better for just viewership that we get a little bit shorter views or videos out there. So the last one I just kind of just touched on the potential of fabricated research into the underlying mechanism and causes of Alzheimer's disease and how researchers are seeing that other scientists that were working in conjunction with pharmaceutical companies may have been falsifying the information and data in relationship to amyloid beta protein 56 being what they were claiming was the primary, cause of Alzheimer's disease, and that's where a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, the drugs out there, such as the most recent FDA-approved pharmaceutical drug, that must I remind all of us, in case you forgot or didn't know, one of the two. Pun intended there, like Alzheimer's disease is, and it's no laughing matter, but the reality is sometimes I get, so I don't get too frustrated and worked up about things, but, people might forget, that the FDA approved drug, for which every single one of their expert panelists said, don't approve this drug. They approved it anyways. And all it did was reduce the rate of amyloid beta protein, not necessarily amyloid beta protein 56, because that may not even exist because of the fabricated science. But it reduced the buildup of these plaques on the brain, and they approved it, but yet the clinical trials in humans showed no improvement in their cognitive function, their physical capabilities, their memory. It didn't help at all. And other drugs that did similar effects on lowering the plaque buildup in the brain in Alzheimer's disease patients actually doubled the risk of dying. So it doesn't help them remember anything. So no improvements in quality of life. And it increases the risk of dying. Like that's what the pharmaceutical companies could do. So just FYI, like that is what is FDA approved for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. That's what their options are, and that's what insurance will pay for, sadly. But as I go through this research article here, or this, culmination of a lot of research articles, this review of the scientific literature on hyperbaric oxygen therapy and the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, I must say that this is not an FDA-approved treatment. You would have to be using hyperbaric oxygen therapy for wellness, for your own health or for the individual's health who may have Alzheimer's disease. It would be what's called an off-label use. So that being said, this is not claiming to treat, prevent, cure Alzheimer's disease. This is just, hey, look at this research study. It's pretty cool what could happen. And I really wish the FDA would not be approving a pharmaceutical drug that had no quality of life benefit based on possible fabricated research claiming that the drug treats the cause of Alzheimer's, but yet anyways, let's move on to what may give hope to those suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So piggybacking off the last video. So here we go on the hope. So a review of application of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And by the way, my name is Dr. Dale Brown. I'm the Wild Doc, owner operator of Wild Roots Wellness Center here in Clarksville, Tennessee, and functional nutritional phytotherapy health coach. We can absolutely help you out. If you want these research articles, obviously there's the title. You see it in front of you. You'll be able to Google it. If you are a paid supporter over on Locals, we do prepare Ashley, amazing team member, will actually prepare a PDF with the links to these research documents, and then also any of the quotes, highlights that I go through and reference as I go through my discussion. So while exact mechanisms and I'm just going to read you these highlights and then we'll discuss. So if you got any questions over there in the chat on Facebook Live right now, go ahead and ask away. If you're on YouTube, please leave a comment. If you got a question, I'll do what I can to review those questions and answer any that I can. Same thing on Instagram. It helps out the algorithms. If you like, you share, you text these to friends and family members, and you comment there, it just helps the algorithms if you're hitting that like button, that share button, that heart button, and commenting especially. Let's interact. So While the exact mechanism of Alzheimer's disease has not been discovered, hyperbaric oxygen therapy has been proven to be effective in the treatment of this degenerative disease. So there's really no question about it. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is effective. But again, just because something's effective doesn't mean that it can achieve FDA approval. And that's sad. Based on, even though hyperbaric oxygen therapy has it just has really a amazing benefit versus risk profile, really, really low risk, especially when you're doing something such as what would be considered mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So based on the outcomes of this clinical and experimental studies, which that is basically summing it up, that we have human trials and we have animal trials, both showing that hyperbaric oxygen therapy improves cognitive performance and health. So memorization, cognitive performance, and functional performance. So physical health. So this review advocates the use of HBOT, and HBOT is what is the acronym for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. For the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. And again, I want to reiterate, just so that those people out there that I am not claiming to treat Alzheimer's disease with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. What I'm doing is reviewing the scientific literature on this therapy when utilized for how is it affecting, how did those with Alzheimer's disease do once they've gone through a series of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So, little background here. It is characterized by the amyloid deposits, neurodegeneration, associated losses of synapses, and low levels of neurotransmitters in the brain. I hit this hard last video, but here's the reality. So if a drug only addresses the amyloid deposits but does not stop the neurodegeneration, the associated loss of synapses, or the low levels of neurotransmitters that are also going on in the brain of Alzheimer's disease patients, guess what? You're not actually stopping the disease process. You're just affecting one thing going on, one mechanism or one associated finding. You're not actually restoring and healing the neurodegeneration. While the exact cause of Alzheimer's disease has not yet been discovered, several risk factors associated with the disease, including age, gender, they should have put smoking in here, they should have put diabetes in here, they should have put in their chemical toxicity and exposure to pollution. They should have put aluminum in there. But again, socioeconomic factors, education, head injuries. And when you look, and one I like to point out oftentimes is that when you look and compare Parkinson's disease to Alzheimer's disease, if you compare like the primary risk factors, it's almost like they're just flip-flopped. If you look at the primary risk factor for Parkinson's disease is actually head and neck trauma. Car accident, whiplash injury, TBIs, concussions, and then secondary is like chemical smoking, chemical exposure. So let's just sum it up as toxicity. And then you look at Alzheimer's disease and you look at like the number one risk factor. It's kind of like chemical exposure, and second most prominent risk factor is head and neck injuries, TBIs, concussions. So you have a physical trauma and then you have chemical traumas. So address those factors, and that's how you would actually be addressing underlying causes of the disease rather than addressing like pharmaceutical industry does, addressing the visual test associated findings with the disease process. Address the cause. That's how you would actually get to a cure, but sadly, that's not what makes sense to the FDA or the pharmaceutical industry. And by cents, I mean not just pennies, but dollars. Animal studies have shown the relationship between hypoxia, which would be low oxygenation. So hypoxia is low oxygen levels within the tissues, and Alzheimer's disease pathophysiology, including amyloid beta proteins, and tau neuropathy, autophagy dysfunction, pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion, generation of reactive oxygen species, and mitochondrial abnormality, all of which worsens the progression of the disease. So again, you look at that. Amyloid beta proteins are only one factor going on there, one cause of or one process that takes place in the brain of Alzheimer's disease patients. So addressing that one thing is not going to reverse the disease process. And that's what's sad, but yet that's what is FDA approved, a drug to treat that. Alzheimer's disease is associated with comorbidities such as cardiovascular disease, stroke, cerebral ischemia, which would be low blood flow to the brain, obstructive sleep apnea. So again, sleep apnea reduces oxygen intake through breathing mechanisms, through the lungs, are all associated with acute to chronic hypoxic conditions. And that creates the environment. Hypoxia, low oxygenation, creates the environment for increased oxidative stress, increased inflammation, increased or rate of neural degeneration, apoptosis or cellular death. Those types of things increase during hypoxic or low oxygenated environments, especially when they're chronic. So, which subsequently it causes the generation of toxic amyloid beta 42, not 56, because 56 was the falsified cause of Alzheimer's disease. Hyperphosphorylation of tau and accumulation of interneuronal amyloid beta and Alzheimer's disease transgenic mice. Thus, hypoxia in Alzheimer's disease is likely associated with cognitive decline, and anti-hypoxic interventions pose a viable treatment option. So what is the most anti-hypoxic therapy? Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Increased oxygenation within the bloodstream. So I want to talk briefly on like the mechanism. What is hyperbaric oxygen therapy? So what it does, and they explain it here, and then I'll talk about it a little bit more, is it causes tissue hyperoxia. So hyper, increased. Oxia, oxygenation, increased oxygen within the tissues and blood and the fluids within the body. By saturating hemoglobin and plasma with oxygen, inducing angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is the buildup or the pro-generation of tissues within the body. So it's kind of like pro-healing. And recruitment of progenitor cells to damaged tissue regions. So that's why the FDA has approved hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or HBOT, for the treatment of wounds that would not heal. Burn victims who want to heal much, much faster. One of the things that I tell people oftentimes, if you're looking at the how and why hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or why you would ever want to utilize for yourself or someone you love with certain varying conditions, even off-label, oxygen is like the most vital nutrient. If we wanted to classify it as nutrient, cells need vitamin C, they need vitamin D, they need vitamin K. There's varying physiological function that need more or less of those vital nutrients or minerals. But then when you look at every cell in the body, what can it absolutely not go without? And if it even has a very, 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 you can go from a level of 60, with your vitamin D level, or even 100, and do much, much better, but yet you can be pretty dang good even with like 30, and 20 and below you start to get rickets, but even just 22 you're not getting rickets, and still a lot of people fare fairly well in the grand scheme of things with low vitamin D levels. But think about that in percentage wise. You can go like, if 60 was the ideal, I'll just throw that out there. If vitamin D of 60 is the ideal level, and you drop down to 20, that's 1/3. If you cannot live or function, you are dying if you are at 30% oxygenation, 1/3 the normal oxygenation of your bloodstream. All right. So just imagine that. So if you said vitamin O, or oxygen, was the most vital nutrient for every cell, giving more of the most vital nutrient every cell in your body needs to regenerate, to heal, to even function, you're going to do better. It's like if healing or restoration of health was a marathon, like the end of the marathon, the finish line was restoration of health. If somebody could actually be breathing straight pure oxygen while they're running that marathon, they're going to get to the finish line much, much faster, no matter their physical health or condition, because oxygen is needed for energy production and output. So healing, finish line, you're healed. You want to get there faster? Increase oxygenation within the bloodstream. So HBOT has thus proved effective in the treatment of decompression sickness, arterial gas embolism, spinal cord injury, stroke, traumatic brain injuries, and chronic and stress-impaired dermal wound healing. So it's proven effective for all of those things as well. All clinical studies involving HBOT treatment for Alzheimer's disease have shown improved cognitive function. So again, all studies on pharmaceuticals, on the other hand, have not shown cognitive improvement. Let me repeat this. The FDA-approved pharmaceutical drugs for Alzheimer's disease have not shown improvement in cognitive function. Not a single one. But all clinical studies, according to the author of this review of the available scientific literature, says all clinical studies involving HBOT treatment for Alzheimer's disease have shown improvement in cognitive function, increased brain metabolism, enhanced spatial working memory scores. HBOT has also been known to increase cognitive performance and spatial working memory scores in healthy adults. So both in healthy and individuals with Alzheimer's disease, HBOT improved cognitive performance. Pretty cool stuff. But yet it's not FDA approved, sadly. And we'll get to more of the discussion of why and why not later. But so the patient was given, and this is just an example, a patient was given 40, 1.15 ATA HBOT. That is atmospheric pressure. So HBOT treatment lasting 50 minutes, 5 days a week for 40 sessions. So 5 days a week, 40 sessions. After completion of the 40 HBOT treatments, the patient reported increased memory, decreased disorientation, improved tremor, deep knee bended motor speed, so again, muscular control, and a 6.5 to 38% increase in regional and global brain metabolism. So MRI studies, PET scans, looking at brain metabolism, use of oxygen, and output of the brain and blood flow to the brain. Guess what? Improved metabolism. So improved physical function of the brain seen on scans. So experimental studies involving Alzheimer's disease mice have demonstrated the effectiveness of HBOT in reducing neural inflammation, improving cognitive and behavioral performances as evidenced by reducing swimming distances, reduced escape latencies, in Morris water maze test. So you put, it's kind of like cruel if you think about it, but yet it's like they're not drowning the mice, but they're putting mice into a maze, a water maze. So they have to literally swim through a maze to get out. Or they put them into an empty, a big old fish bowl. It's just a fish tank. And then they put the mouse in at one corner or one spot, the same spot each time. And then they have a hidden platform somewhere underneath the surface of the water. And the mice have to find their way to the platform. And then they time, because eventually the mice is going to be like, oh, it's the left-hand corner. That's where I need to go. I get put in the water. I know I go to the left-hand corner. I get the left-hand corner. I don't need to swim anymore. So the mice remember that, and they go directly to that platform. So then when they induce Alzheimer's disease in these mice, and then they put them in the water, they can't find the platform again because they forgot. That's what Alzheimer's disease does. It causes people to forget their past. And sadly, it not just the platform or their home or their bathroom or their phone number. It causes them to forget their family members. That's why there was actually a man, who was it? Actually, I don't know if you, there was a pastor, like one of them famous pastors on TV. And this really made me question his true, legitimate, faith in what Christ could do. But he said that Alzheimer's disease would be a clinical or sickness and disease that then divorce was okay and justified. Because he said Alzheimer's disease is like a living death. So in essence, because they've lost their mind, then they're basically physically here but not mentally here, so then they're dead, and I guess you just marry the mental person, not the physical person. So if the mental state of the person is lost, then he was justifying divorce. And I kind of disagree with that. But it's just sad that even somebody who claims to be a man of faith, following Christ, if he does. And I'm not questioning his faith necessarily, but it did kind of call into like, I disagree that. I disagree with him. I could politely disagree with him. It doesn't mean that he's not going to heaven or anything. But the reality is it's just so sad that, you know what? Do we really believe that God is less than the capability of being able to heal somebody with it? And what can we look to utilize within, God's, and that's where I could flip ahead here real quick to this hyperbaric oxygen and ginkgo biloba extract that ameliorated cognitive and memory impairment via these mechanisms, nuclear factor kappa B, pathway and rat model of Alzheimer's disease. So this is a clinical trial. Why does ginkgo biloba seem to improve cognitive function? Because it improves blood flow to the brain. It reduces oxidative stress on the brain. It increases vascular health, reduces metabolic syndrome. So there's lots of these benefits that have maybe direct and indirect effects on the physiological state of Alzheimer's disease. Ginkgo can do that. So I always think, thank God, he said in Ezekiel 47:12, let fruit be for food and leaves be for medicine. So ginkgo leaves are like medicine. God said it. We're going to use, he didn't say ginkgo, but he said leaves. So I'm like, hey, the Bible's true. So what leaves could we use when somebody is suffering with Alzheimer's disease? Then we can say, hey, God, thank you so much. And we give praise and worship to our Lord and Savior for the fact that he provided for us when we're in a time of need, when somebody is in a state of illness. So we'll go through that one later, but let's continue on with this one here. Experimental studies in Alzheimer's disease. Mice have demonstrated effectiveness. Already read through that. And this is some of the overview. So it reduces neuroinflammation. It's kind of like the red dots reduce. So it reduced astrogliosis, reduced microgliosis, reduced inflammatory cytokines, but it increased scavenger receptor A expression, which reduced the damage to our nervous system, increased arginase 1, increased anti-inflammatory cytokines, in relationship, and that's through neural inflammation. Now, what about in the arena of oxidative stress and neurotoxicity? It inhibits induced or amyloid beta protein 25 to 35 induced toxicity, reduced Bax expression, reduced cytochrome C release. Just go through the reduced HIF1 alpha, reduced that MDA levels, increased glutathione. Think about detoxification. In the natural health realm, a lot of people seek to supplement with glutathione or glutathione precursors, but if you could enhance your body's own capability of producing glutathione specifically within the nervous system, think what you could potentially do for things like autism and other things that are associated with glutathione depletion or lack thereof, or low levels of glutathione. Increased activity of superoxide dismutase, a strong antioxidant. Reduced neural apoptosis and increased neuroprotection. So another mechanism by which hyperbaric oxygen could potentially have a beneficial effect on the status and state of Alzheimer's disease. It would reduce mitochondrial death, reduce P38 mitogen active protein kinase or MAPK phosphorylation, increased neurotropins, increased nitric oxide, increased mitochondrial transfer from the astrocytes to the neurons, so that more energy for the neurons to function, activation of NF-κB pathway, increased ATP production, which is the cellular engine, the gasoline for every one of our cells, increased mitochondrial production, increased myelin basic protein expression, increased vascular endothelial growth factor, so regeneration of the blood vessels necessary to reoxygenate and carry blood flow to our brains. So these are all the mechanisms by which hyperbaric oxygen therapy is proven to affect the nervous system, the body. So broadly, HBOT alleviates Alzheimer's disease symptoms through a decrease in neuroinflammation, oxidative stress, neurotoxicity, neuroapoptosis, that's programmed cell death of the nerves, and overall reduction in amyloid burden. HBOT also increases neuroprotection, promoting changes at the cellular level, reducing tau protein phosphorylation, upregulation of myelin. Basic. What's that, 2?
You have like 2 minutes left.
2 minutes left, I know. Never get through it all, but that's why I give you the links. So I give you the original research that I would want to discuss and go through. Let's go through some of this. Where's that one? Give me a second. So here it is. Here it is. So while the FDA currently approves 14 clinical applications of HBOT, there is a need for more clinical studies to investigate treatment protocols for HBOT that are most effective in Alzheimer's disease patients, and to understand if the therapeutic effect of HBOT are due to its direct effect on brain functions or its indirect influence on the efficacy of the medications taken by Alzheimer's disease patients. So I wanted to touch on that statement really quickly here, okay? So basically this is like the out clause it seems researchers have. Well, the FDA hasn't approved it for it, although all clinical trials both in human and animals show improvements in memory and cognitive scores. So it's absolutely beneficial for people with Alzheimer's disease and mice with Alzheimer's disease. All of the studies show benefit, actually, and real world effects and real human life suffering decrease effects. But the FDA hasn't approved it, and they've approved drugs that have no effect on memory and cognitive performance and declining rates of, and death, actually increased death. But we need more research. So wait a minute, the FDA has approved drugs that the research shows don't actually have real-world decreases in the suffering of Alzheimer's disease patients, don't allow for Alzheimer's disease patients to remember their family members again. That's what the FDA has approved. Or they fast-tracked drugs that had no clinical benefit whatsoever, but then multiple animal and human trials have shown HBOT to be effective in improving human life for those who are suffering with Alzheimer's disease. But yet it's not FDA approved and we need more research. Why not fast track HBOT therapy for Alzheimer's disease patients? Why haven't they done that? You want to know why? Because there's not a large group of lobbyists out there lobbying for HBOT therapy. And I don't want lobbyists. We shouldn't have to have people like businessmen marketing this to our government officials and our FDA. The FDA should simply say what is safe and effective. HBOT is obviously very, very safe. And it's obviously effective according to the science out there. Now, and they say here, this author also says the direct influence on the efficacy of medications taken by Alzheimer's disease. And that's another thing, is they believe that it's not the HBOT, maybe it's the drugs. And the people are on the drugs when they go into HBOT. So maybe the improvement is that HBOT has an enhancement effect on what the drugs are doing. But the drugs had no beneficial effect in the first place. And that could be the case. But so how would they explain all the animal trials that don't put the animal on a drug? So it wouldn't be that. Like I kind of question the author's logic. I love this write-up. I'm not harping, but it's like, why did you have to throw that in there? Oh yeah, we want to make sure that we make drugs look good. That's what it seems like so many scientific researchers in the health realm do. And it's kind of like they have to, so they don't do what I like to do, and I make sure to do, is point the finger at criminals. And people are there for the bang for their buck. They're thieves stealing from people because they put hope in a drug that has no hope, that there is no hope in that drug. It's a bunch of lies. And that's what, again, go back to where we're at right now with the Alzheimer's research fabrication being found out. But it's not the enhancement of the medications. It's the direct effects of what increasing the level of oxygen and then also the different mechanism that HBOT therapy has. So it's not the medications, because the animal trials done with HBOT, we're not giving those animals drugs as well. So that kind of dispels that idea and proves that theory wrong. So again, in conclusions, and this is why hopefully I would love to see it FDA approved, because then insurance would cover it and it would give people more access to HBOT and affordability for them, considering it wouldn't be out-of-pocket expense then. But you know what? If my family member, my dad, my mom, sister, friends, I would want them in HBOT. That's me. I'm not saying that it's a treatment or cure for Alzheimer's disease. And that was one of the things I touched on, and I got to go to another meeting. But HBOT is not going to cure what is called, because again, just a simple explanation, understand me. If it is disease within the GI tract, if it's fatty liver disease is associated with the onset of Alzheimer's disease, smoking is associated with Alzheimer's disease, diabetes is associated with Alzheimer's disease. So if somebody is eating a horrible McDonald's diet, and again, hopefully I don't get sued by McDonald's, but again, saturated fat and junk, if they're eating and they're smoking cigarettes and they're living a horrible lifestyle that causes oxidative stress and damage their vascular system, inflammation in their nervous system, and that's the triggering mechanism that Alzheimer's would then be induced by. If they eat junk food every single day and they continue smoking cigarettes and they get an HBOT, it kind of counteracts that lifestyle and kind of brings them back a little bit more towards that being capable of cognitively functioning well and remembering people. The disease process is still going to progress because HBOT's not going to undo a horrible diet. It's not going to undo smoking multiple packs of cigarettes every single day. But you know what? If somebody decided to start eating right, get a healthy gut, stop smoking, control their blood sugar, their metabolic rate, and then wanted to heal faster, wow, HBOT is an amazing addition in that regimen. So love you all. Appreciate you all. Again, I'm Dr. Dale Brown. I'm the Wild Doc here at Wild Roots Wellness in Clarksville, Tennessee. If you want to give us a call, 931-591-2010. Love you all. Appreciate you all. I do ask that you share this message, share this information, comment in the comment section, whether YouTube, Rumble, or Facebook. Check out Locals there for our supporters there who get the PDFs with all the links to the research studies if you'd like them. So be well, y'all. We'll see you.